I've never used one of these. Do that sound good?
Yeah, great.
Awesome. So, this should be interesting. I was just going to give my testimony. I worked 14 hours yesterday and I was exhausted. I went home, expecting to get great sleep. Around 2 a.m., I started listening to the Lord. He's like, "You're going to preach." And I was like, all right. It's kind of ironic. I was thinking all week. I gave my first practice sermon at the residency program. It was over the prodigal son. And when I first got the assignment, I was like, man, this is really great on how Christ, reaches out to the non-believer. And then I read it, and I was like, man, sounds a lot like me, So before I get into the message, I want to share a little bit with my testimony. It starts off when I was really young. So I'm actually dyslexic, autistic, ADHD, and I have a speech impediment. If I get real tired, you're gonna really see the speech impediment. The dyslexia comes through. Still can't say certain words like caterpillar. Can't say it. I'm in the fitness world, and there's a word called hypertrophy. I can't say it. Brian, you might?
Hypertrophy?
Yep, can't say it. Right? So, growing up with those, I tried really hard to be normal. With dyslexia, if you don't know what that is, you struggle with words. You struggle with letters. And I had friends, and they were good friends, but as kids do, they make fun of each other. And they would always like, when we were making fun of each other, they'd ask me to spell things. And obviously I couldn't. And I hated how hard I had to try to be normal. And so I felt like a mistake. A little fun fact for you, why I know so much about history is I would remember history, so when they would ask me those questions, I could come back with a history question. If you don't know history and I don't know how to spell, then we're even, right? Tell me about the cannons of Constantinople. They don't know cannons. What? See, I can't spell the word cat, but you don't know those cannons, right? But when I was going over the prodigal son, it's in Luke 15, I do want to paint the picture first. Jesus is sitting down with what it says, tax collectors and sinners. And if you're reading in the ESV, it says, the Pharisee said, this man receives sinners and eats with them. Okay, and then the NIV, it says, this man welcomes sinners and eats with them. And I do want to know, so we understand who Jesus is sitting with, okay, tax collectors. To us, we all hate paying taxes, but not to the degree that the Jews or the Israelites at the time hated paying taxes. It was a sign of their oppression. And the tax collectors were traitors of their own people. So if we can give an mental image for us, it would be like someone who is taking down the American flag and burning it and putting up another flag. I have family who've served, and that really rubs me the wrong way. Right? And then the sinners, those are the people we don't want in church. You go to church, you dress a little bit nicer. You shouldn't say that in church. And when going back to what the Pharisee said, welcome and receive, it doesn't really do justice to what they actually said. In Greek, the word is post-dekamai. The definition is to receive oneself or to admit oneself to you. Still sounds kind of nerdy. So there's videos online when soldiers come home from war and they surprise their family members. I'm sure we've all seen those. And the wife or the mother or the father just turns around, and there's a bleep second where he's like, right? And they drop everything and embrace that person. And when I was studying the word post-dekamai, that is the best image that came to my head. So the Pharisees don't know at the time what they're actually preaching is the gospel. Right? Where were we? Okay, let's get it. And so there's a lot to that. And what's interesting about the prodigal son is it's different than the other two parables. The lost sheep starts off lost. The lost coin starts off lost. But what the prodigal son did is went to the Father. He was with the Father and the wealth. And a lot of us, or myself personally, I grew up in church. I knew about Noah. I knew about Jonah and the big fish. I knew David and the giant. And Zacchaeus was a wee little man. Wee little man was he. He climbed up in a sycamore tree for the Lord he wanted to see, right? But I also knew about Jesus and what he did on the cross for me. And when I was around 9, I accepted Jesus Christ, and I honestly meant that. But at one point in my life, I said, that's not enough. I chose, because growing up I felt like a mistake, I felt like I had to earn it. You just couldn't give it to me. It wasn't mine to have. And so growing up, and I grew up, if you know football references, I grew up on the 5-yard line. My dad was a youth pastor, and my mom's a praying woman, and I would not be here today without them. And I know when I was lost, my mom had a lot of prayers that she didn't know it was going to get answered. But with feeling like a mistake, and living with dyslexia, I started getting good at it, and I started being good at a game called football. I was actually pretty good at it. And I was getting recruited by some really big schools, and then I got hurt, and I still went D1. And so I really thought, I'm going to become an NFL football player so I can have worth. I prayed for strength. Because, when I was a kid with dyslexia, I prayed so hard for God to make anyone but me. To fix his mistake. And so if he wasn't going to do it, at least I'd pray for strength. And I thought if I prayed for strength, then I could achieve something so I'd have value. And my football career did not go that way. I never stepped on the field. I injured my back in January of 2019, where I slipped a fourth disc in my back and started taking pain medicine for the pain. I don't need them. I'm just a football player. I'll keep them up when I'm done. And that went on for a couple months, until August, until I had a weird twist up to where I found myself partially paralyzed in my right leg. I could do one good stinky leg, right, when I walked around. Okay, coming from the clubs, they got a little worried. They're like, why is he still doing that? Right? Like, we're not dancing no more. And then at the same time, and again, I wasn't the greatest boyfriend of all time. I was dealing with some stuff. The girl who I thought I was going to marry called me drunk one night, accusing me that I cheated. And then I didn't. But then she finally blurted out, and she said, it's just you're not a football player, so you're no longer enough to be worth it. And so the two things that I thought I had value and that gave me worth, I was gone. My identity, if you ask me, who are you? I was Brad Papez, the football player. And now I was Brad Papez, the mistake. And you can see with the prodigal son in verse 13, it says, not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took his journey into a far country. And there he squandered his property in reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in the country, and he began to be in need. So when he went to hire himself out to one of the citizens of that country, and who sent him into the fields to feed the pigs. And when he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. The thing is when you search for purpose or your identity anywhere else from Christ, it can take you far, but it's always going to fall short. You're going to go and it's going to work, and then all of a sudden that hole in your heart is going to be there. And it's an interesting thing because you're willing to do things you're not willing. You never thought you would do. So I started with the painkillers. I started taking a lot. There's something called looping out. So what you would do is I would mix alcohol with a bunch of over-counter drugs, and you just mix them all together, and basically it would just numb you. Just numb you to everything. Until one day I wanted to go clean. I kind of realized some stuff happened. I realized I had an addiction. And I decided to go clean. And then a couple of days passed, and I relapsed. And I was working as a bouncer then And I went to go buy some stuff, and I got busted for a fake ID. And I was ticked off that night, and there was a guy who was being annoying, and so I beat him up, and he was a lot weaker than myself, and I didn't have to do what I did. And I remember sitting there in my car after my shift, sitting in the parking lot, and thinking how my mom would be ashamed of me. That I couldn't give up the pills, that the mother who tried so hard for me and the father who tried so hard for me to get me to college would be ashamed of her son. And that feeling of mistake was there again, to a degree. And a little earlier, and I had less freedoms when my brother's car broke down in September, and this was in November. And I decided the only way that I would fix the mistake was to end it. And so I grabbed my gun, and I loaded one in the chamber, and I said, one more song. And surprisingly, my brother borrowed my car that morning and turned on a Christian radio station. Who You Say I Am by Hillside Song came on. And then Reckless Love. And there's a Bible, my brother's Bible in the back. I did a Bible flip, and it was Matthew 11:28. All those who are tired, all those who are weary, come to me and I'll give you rest. And I prayed out to God, and I was like, God, I need you now. And he goes, can I use you? And I said, I have nothing to give. And he said, can I use you? I said, I'm broken. And he said, can I use that? And I said, have it. And I wish I could tell you, at that point on, I was on fire for God. That everything he had planned for me, the calling of becoming a pastor, I listened to right there, but I was so scared and felt like I had nothing to offer. Jesus was talking to people who lived in the Middle East and who was around farms. I don't know if you've ever smelled feces in the bright, hot sun, but it reeks. It smells terrible. I have a second cousin who's in Iowa, and they have a very successful farm, pig farm. And we were touring it one day in my great grandpa's Model A. As we were driving to where they keep the pigs, and we were talking, the smell of feces became deafening. All our conversations ended. And my second cousin had a great quote. He said, "You just get used to it, or you can turn around." We chose to turn around. What do you do when you feel like that? When you promised God you wouldn't do something, but you did it. When you knew that he went to the cross knowing that you would walk away from him, yet he still said, I'm going after you. How do you feel like that? And, I wouldn't sit with God. I would talk about God, but I wouldn't pray with him. Kind of like a fake jewelry. I looked like it, but I wasn't it. And so a couple months passed, and I met a girl I really liked again. She was pretty, right? I didn't pray if she was the one. I said she had to be the one. I was so anxious to get from point A to point B because one of my dreams is to have a family. Until a friend of mine texted me with some proof that she was just using me for free food. And a feeling of mistake came in my heart. So I came to the conclusion, this nice guy act, this Christian act, it's over. I'm never going to let someone make me feel that way again. And this is probably the worst, is I told you just missed over a part of my testimony. A little before that, I was in Columbus at an internship. And my appendix bursted due to my drug habit after I went, even though I was clean, it did take a toll on my body. And I was doing an internship in Columbus, Ohio during COVID. And they gave me painkillers. And when I went to take the painkillers, I was going to take all of them. I was going to relapse. And Columbus is about 6 hours away. And at 10 o'clock at night, I called my mom. And I said, Mom, and I let her know everything was going on, and I said, I can't do this. And she said, I'm on my way. And she drove for 6 hours to pick me up. I listened for no longer a slave for 6 hours straight until she picked me up. And that was, I would say, the first time I rested since the back injury. But fast forward now back to the girl situation. I'm sorry about that, guys. Growing up, I wanted to be the good gentleman. We all, as men, we all have this idea of being the knight in shining armor, And after I was hit that final time, I said, you know what? No, I'm not going to be the knight in shining armor anymore. And I hate to admit this, but there was a bet I had with my friend, and we call it body count, but if you don't know what that means, it's how many people you slept with. And at that point, I was at 3. He was at 7. We had a bet who could get to 10 first. And I beat him to 10, but I also beat him. I was at 20 before he got to 10. I used my scars to scar others. It hurt because I knew what I was doing. But I didn't care. It brings me to the story of Peter. When you make that promise to God, I'm not going to do something, but you do it. You look at Peter, and he was with Jesus for 3.5 years, and Jesus goes, you're going to deny me. She's like, no, you found me at the Sea of Galilee. You said, come follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men. He's like, and Jesus said, no, you're going to deny me 3 times before the rooster crow. And something stood out to me when I was reading it this week. Okay. And Luke 22:60-61 says, Peter said, man, I don't know what you are talking about. And immediately while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed, and the Lord looked at Peter. As Peter was denying Christ, he looked into the eyes of Christ. As Peter went, he wept bitterly. When you're searching for this identity that's not Christ, it's this hole starts getting bigger, and what that used to be fun doesn't fit it anymore. And there was a part in my life where I started serving the homeless, because again, I'm going to work for God's love. He's not going to just give it to me. No. It's too easy. I had to fix the mistake. And there was a situation where I should have bought a better gun. And I was praying about that. I was like, hey, God, what should I buy this better gun? He's like, you take all the weapons of the world besides the weapon I gave you. So I started reading my Bible. And I came about a verse in Revelations. I didn't have it in my notes until this morning. And it's Revelations 3:15, and then we're going to skip from 15 to 18. It says, I now know your works. You are neither cold nor hot. Would that you were either cold or hot. So because you are lukewarm and neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. And I was living my life as a lukewarm Christian because I was going to earn his love. And if you go to verse 18, it says, I consoled you to buy from gold that's been refined by fire, so that you may be rich. And there's a part in my life to where I was like, okay, I need to start reading my Bible. I started Revelations, and I read that verse. Really didn't kick at the time. And there's a time I was really lonely, and I went, this was back in October. I went over to a girl's house. I knew it was wrong. And I decided to add one more to my body count. And the loneliness but conviction hit like no other. I drove home and I bawled my eyes out all the way home. Just bawled. The mistake feeling was still there. And I still didn't listen. Until I was going to go with one more girl and God stepped in the way of that. And you think I'd be like, oh, thanks, God. Now I was mad. And I I was like, where's my wife? Where's my love? Everyone who I've ever had as a girlfriend has broke my heart. Either cheated on me or some sort of way. Where's mine? And he asked me an honest question. He said, are you a man of God, a woman of God with love? The honest answer was no. And I said, okay. He goes, the reality is I'm protecting you from her. You are lukewarm. And I remember my history classes in the verse 18, I encourage you to buy gold. That's when people refined by fire. See, back in those days, what they would do is refine gold, is they would take this rock, okay, they put it in this crucible. It would get real hot. Basically, all the impurities would rise to the top, and then the forger would scrape it clean, and just do that repeatedly. And the weird thing is, how do you know the gold is pure? Well, when the forger can see his reflection in it. So what the author is saying here is, says, let God work on you until he can see his reflection in you. So in that moment, I prayed. I was like, Lord, just work on me in that direction. We're going to go back to the prodigal son. And as he arose, he came to his father. This is verse 20. But while he was still a long ways off, his father saw him and felt compassion and embraced him and kissed him. While he was still long off. See, Jesus will meet you where you're at. It doesn't say the prodigal son got up and took a shower, got cleaned, did something amazing. He walked a long ways. It smelled like feces. And his father said, that's my son. He didn't come and embrace his son when he was a soldier, when he did something worthwhile, but when all he had to offer was his heart. His father posed that among him and threw him a lavish party. There was a time in March where I was reading my Bible, and this is in Luke. It's 22. And he said, and answer them, go tell John what you have seen and heard. The blind receive their sight, and the lame walks, the leopard are cleansed, and the deaf hear. The dead are raised, and the poor have the good news and preach to them. And I was sitting there at my kitchen table in March. I decided to pray, Lord, please just fix your mistake. I just don't want to be one anymore. As clear as day, I heard God say, who called you a mistake? I didn't make a mistake when I made you. It wasn't a mistake when I died for you. And it's not a mistake when I loved you. And as I look back through the 5 years of God's hand on my life, from that day, 5 years, coming up on 5 years, when he asked me if he could use me, I see him time and time again, coming through when he shouldn't, he didn't have to. And I read this story, and I look at my life, and I see, look how much I was the first son. But I also look how I'm the second son. Not just saying when I see someone get a blessing, say, God, why don't I have that blessing? But the son never embraced his brother. The father had all right in the world to say, you broke my heart time and time again. You said you were dead to me. And now you're saying you're sorry? How do I know you're going to change? If I ask everyone in here, and if we're being honest, I'm sure we've all felt that way about somebody else. We spoke that way. But we couldn't imagine Jesus saying that. Imagine if he threw down the cross. We've all given him a million reasons to not, but he does. Because he doesn't, his love, he just doesn't want to embrace you in love. He wants to transform you in love. There's a Bible verse from Romans 2:4. It says, "Do you not presume on the riches of kindness and forbearance and patience, not knowing that God's kindness is meant to lead to repentance?" In that verse where it says, while we were still sinners, while we were still his enemy, Christ died for us. And how many times have I not offered that to my brother? I said, oh, I can't wait for Judgment Day for them. Do I love like Christ does? Or I've given up on me too? And so I end today. I encourage everybody to sit there and examine what part of your heart has God not put a speck of mind yet. What part are you still holding on saying, I need to earn it? That it reeks, that it smells, that it's deafening in my heart. What part of that heart is there? Are you willing to let God embrace that?